All right, hello. Thank you all for coming tonight, and thank you, Paul Aho, Dean of Paducah School of Art and Design, for having us. This is our first reading in the Bill Ford Gallery, which is a fantastic space, and I hope this becomes a more frequent occurrence. We're excited to have Amy Wright here tonight. She's the author of Everything in the Universe, Cracker Sonnets, and 5 chapbooks. In addition, she has co-authored with William Wright, Creeks of the Upper South. She's the nonfiction editor at Zone 3 Press and coordinator of creative writing at Austin Peay State University in Clarksville, Tennessee. Among her long list of awards, she has an individual artist grant from the Tennessee Arts Commission, a fellowship to the Virginia Center for Creative Arts, and 2 Peter Taylor fellowships from the Kenyon Review Writers Workshop. What I'm drawn to most in the work of Amy Wright is the sheer scope of her poetic material. Of the 3 books I've mentioned, she constantly turns her gaze toward the unexpected, that which is so often ignored. Small Creeks of the Upper South, the complicated, overlooked lives of those in rural America, or, as in Everything in the Universe, the minute world of insects. I have since learned that she makes a very mean cricket risotto. I haven't tried it, though. In each instance, Wright's thoughtful insights are always balanced by a careful and playful ear. Like fireflies, her poems are luminous, filled with differing voices as she writes, joyriding peaks and valleys, like an Arctic tern atop a knob. Her poems revel in language. However, they also almost always ask us to dig, to look more deeply at ourselves, how we hunger and hurt daily. As she writes, how bright the world might look if only we lit up fearless, willing to peel back the darkness. Please join me in welcoming Amy Wright.
Thank you, Britton. And thank you for letting me use this space. This is a beautiful gallery. Very honored to be reading here. How's the sound? Can you hear me well in the back? I'm going to begin by reading a poem from Creeks of the Upper South because I think it helps frame my aesthetic, which is very much about the interplay between the natural world and the cultural world. This is called A List of Impaired Waters, and it's the second poem in this collaborative book. A List of Impaired Waters. Capillaries on the water body map, broken from Bacon Creek to Sweetwater, ecoregion 67F crisscrossing ecoregion 71G, Bledsoe County, Bledsoe tributaries. Alston, Anderson, Arnaud, Bagwell, Braden, Carroll, Collins, Cummings, Davis, Dyer, Eaton, Ewing, Finch, Gammon, Hickman, Howard, Mathis, Melton, Mill, Mitchell, Odell, Reed, Rutherford, Scutts, Spencer, Stewarts, Shugs, Taylor. Creeks, among others, namesaked for neighbors, nowhere to be found on cleanup, August 4th, from noon to 4. The afternoon otherwise spent getting haircuts, writing poems about scuba diver-sized catfish in the Cumberland River. Buying school notebooks on tax-free weekend. Drinking transparent soft drinks with honey-sweetened pretzels, a bottle of narcotics dissolving in the valley. Too late, they figure, when they figure. There are things we don't talk about, bodies and what they do sliding toward each other, greasy as candle wicks. The stink of mine drainage in the North Chickamauga, a knot of engine parts and spring-shot sofa cushions, the color of Pangaea pulling itself back together. Did you all recognize some of those last names? Because those are the last names that I grew up with in Southwest Virginia. And so I live now in Tennessee, but part of this book was inspired when Will asked me if I wanted to collaborate with him, and he lives in Georgia now. And so the Creeks of the Upper South was time for us to both sort of revel in the region, and it became kind of an homage to the ecosystems of the region, and so it quickly became a sort of environmental book, even though we were environmental and cultural, they're really intertwined in here because I think they're inseparable. There are a lot of, there's a poem in here where I talk about well, I'll just read it, but there are specific species that really can't live anywhere else. Nothanotus wapati. There are folks who would die if moved to a nearby city. Absurdly, they know when other members of their species leave after high school, thrive, not to try a similar relocation themselves. For a while, they're pushed and prompted as if it were a matter of courage. Then the questions are dropped. They buy 10 country acres where buzzards circle a Victorian built in the 1800s on a foundation of locust logs, plow a garden, stack a cord of woods out back, mate. Still, they find it hard to grasp how a darter can specialize its number of diagonal scales to fit the southern bend of Richland Creek at County Road 4209, so well that to adapt to any other habitat would be to become something else. The wavy, copper-colored lines of its cheeks, such a match to the fast-flowing Giles County freshwater, ichthyologists recognize it as a new species, by chance, just before extinction. Their distinguishing yellow-spotted fins waving like flags from a porch or hands. So, of course, having grown up where I did, I saw the species and I saw the mountains when they were logged, and I saw the regrowth and the devastation of strip mining versus going in there and mining mindfully. There's actually a book out right now called A Hidden Life of Trees, and it was a German bestseller, which has been translated in Canada and brought here. And he talks a lot about horse logging, which of course is one of the sustainable ways to do it, not bringing the machinery in, because you don't think about the soil as a living thing, but when you come in there and disturb the soil with the machines, then it affects the entire ecosystem fundamentally. So I'm glad there are certain efforts being made to preserve the whole forest. And so to transition, these poems were actually written first. This is my oldest collection, as I was telling people in the class today. These I started in grad school, these poems, and they changed quite a bit from how you see them now. But this poem, and really the last third of the book, started being written after I was also working on the insect poems, and the environmental message of the other books are kind of intertwined in this. So they're all really part of the same conversation, but this one is called Habitat. Mac and Polly cling to the mountainside, sphagnum moss on an abalone camper. Their father collects disability. They are ingenious manipulators of flag girls in parking lots, track stars in waffle joint back booths, French fryers in Ferris wheel top buckets. At home, unable to avoid introducing them to pudding on the sofa, their young mother who makes them pretend she's their sister. Mud puppies cut through a school of crappies, push the shallows, sprout toes sensitive as tentacles on a slug's head, ascend the muck, thin-skinned as newborns, or did back then. Of course, Mac will grow up, start a tree-trimming business, meet Scotty, who isn't afraid of his wolf pup or long silences. How a hard storm closes their exit. Imperiled water shrews and hellbender playthings give her something to lose in that nothing much mobile. A freshwater turtle she feeds periodically, a handful of cereal that crackles when wet like maggots. Do you want to move someplace else? Mac asks after lovemaking, her nape wet, fan blades slowing with her pulse. Eddie has a body shop in Lafayette. Scotty pulls a squirrel's tail curl through a hairbrush she keeps near the bed like all Perry women. Away from here, I wouldn't know what it looks like to be happy, she says. I would test it, the way a girl will suffer her love to prove his love real. Wouldn't hear the morning dove or see the blazing star nod its fandango ascent from a far field. No, it's better to know chorus frogs are in danger, the lake sturgeon almost lost. What are those creatures to me I cannot be sorry never to have seen? And one of those creatures I have never actually seen, but thankful for the internet, I have seen pictures there. A lot of the research in this book, The Everything in the Universe, was inspired by starting to date an entomologist. And so all of a sudden he opened a world, which I think always happens when you fall in love with somebody, that suddenly they have all these stories and this different perspective, and they sort of help you see things in a new way. But I really, even though I'd grown up on a farm, hadn't studied the bugs that closely until I started dating him. And then suddenly they were just kind of magical creatures. And so this is flower beetle. Aegistrata, your exoskeleton's polished metal acid trip mirror reflects bug-eyed cousins whose profit margins differ markedly from your glam get-up's luminous beauty. 70s disco gypsy, otherworld holdover, come to show earthlings how to shimmer and shake our pygidia. Groove on, multiplicity's iris dilating orchestra. And for those of you who don't know, after you write a book, I didn't know before I wrote a book, you really want people, you think it will be enough to have the book published in the world, but then it's not enough if no one talks about your book. And so then you really want people to review your book. I mean, it keeps getting, and then eventually I suppose you want more books and you want awards, and it never ends. But finally, I got a review, which I was just delighted to have gotten one from a stranger. So she didn't even owe me anything. She just voluntarily started reading my book and talking about it very nicely. But in her review, she said that the richest language poems in the book were these three. I have one to H.D.'s Bees, and I have one for Emily Dickinson's Bees, and I have one for Fannie Howe's Bees. And just in honor of the review that she wrote, I'm going to read one of the poems. I never read them at readings, but we'll see how it works. Fannie Howe's Bees, Tremulous. Static sweeps a lone briz past, a buzz without a wee, a zilch. Before 10:50, a beh, a beta, a beige, a binny, fainter by the minute, a sun-kissed fuzzed honey hex that can't be passed. Not this summer will we scale back, when we just got that poolside cup with its slick lip of caramel sweat. Murky. Dark tick of ice cap melt, butters red clay into river mud, trash bags stuffed with plastic collared squid. The meme dots six-pack wrap we cut and crush, peppers to our chest spritzed with systemic neonics, words we don't know to distrust. Dread. A meeting room dynamic shifts before a woman eyeballing not a bee, but an insect evolved to stop pests and herself epipenless. What we can see to correct, we face uncertain whose place it is to act. We sit with the wasp, motionless, track its whereabouts. A family flagging mother on the internet, back from deployment, holding her own in an Iron Man, them no readier than last time for her absence. Estranged. A beekeeper hums to keep companionable grit in back of the throat. A wine-wet wheat berry chewed soft. The sky gone, we went to the Superdome after the flood like an ark. I kind of like skipping back and forth through these poems. I'll read another one from Creeks just because I've never actually put all of the books in conversation. This is near the end of the book. And the way we did this collaboration, I don't know if you all have done collaborative work before, but the way we did this one was he wrote a poem, I wrote a poem, he wrote a poem, I wrote a poem. So we went back and forth that way. So we all sort of like have separate poems, but I've also written where you write a few lines or a stanza, and then they write a few lines or stanza, and you intertwine within the poems. But what's interesting is that I've read through the manuscript so many times, sometimes I forget which poems are mine and which ones are his. And our voices, although they're very different in our disparate books, they really come together in a certain way in this book and sound very similar. Mouth to Headwaters. The thin creek bride moon is a slick one, likes her solitude and pulls her bedroom door to, slips into the barred owl's hooded eyes. There is no pressure, water in its acquiescence does not know, the utterly unambitious race of leaf over leaf, attraction to what cannot be held. The owl blinks like an eclipse or a cloud passing in front of a man, looking into the distance at himself in time. In one eye, obvious as grit, is fear of loss. In the other, a blue hook, half the shape of a heart. And I grew up on a farm in Southwest Virginia, and we had, there were actual farm hands, and this one I always think of Bill Wright, who died in 2009, I think, but this is very much the farm hand who comes to mind when I read this poem, the farm hand. Shirt tail cascading like cloven hooves, trampling a mountain aflame with drought. The man in the wood-beat grass walks, a bag of nickels being dropped atop a spring-loaded shotgun. Speaks so rarely he might be a colloidal plate awaiting an imprint of 100 thrushes exiting a lake named for the seldom-seen swan. He walked beautifully. There are certain people, I mean, not beautifully, like elegantly or gracefully, but he just walked like the weight of the world was falling off of him with every step. He just let it go, let it down with all of his steps. This is a little one, Feather Wings. Beetles small enough to enter a fungus spore are hidden among us, without lenses, depicted in drawings to comfort introvert experts on websites. I also didn't know until I started dating the entomologist that there are worlds of people out there, introverted people who have very tedious tasks before them. They count, insects. For a while, one of his research projects was to count the, I think it was the thistle borer, something that, but along, just to count insects as tiny as they are to see how many were on certain plant species. And so the ones who make the drawings of these tiny, intricate insects, there's another art for that, and I developed a lot of appreciation for it in the midst of this. I will come back to this one. I'll read this one because it's about the region. You all have probably been to the Wells Creek Basin. Do you know about the Wells Creek Basin? It's, well, I'll tell you about it here. It's very nearby. I think it's probably 40 minutes from you all. It was about an hour from us in Clarksville. So, Wells Creek Basin. Between 100 and 200 million years ago, a meteor plowed 2,000 feet into the Wells Creek area, sent out shatter cones. Pocked a 4-mile-wide crater drilled by NASA, moon scientists, and later visited by bank tellers and dentists trying to save their family the uncertain impact of divorce. Shatter cones seam shock lines fine as hair strands, petrify velocity geologists who would use to determine the 36,000 miles per hour speed when the meteor struck. Sudden blossom of molten limestone, silt lotus, earth splash. The planet's face, breakable as a bucket of water set down in a living room to catch shocks of rainwater. Small garden where seeds flower at once, change like a girl stopped mid-row, to fondle the pink, like a girl stopped mid-cornrow to fondle the pink earrings she plants. You all have planted those little pink seeds, right? They suddenly seemed like earrings to me in the middle of that poem. And because in the middle of class today, I gave you all a lesson that you may not have wanted on the plum curculio, we have a plum curculio poem in here, if I can find it. I didn't mark that one. Well, I can't find it, so I'll read this one. Another education in insects. There are people who have bloody-nosed beetles as pets. They call them bloody-nosed beetles because that's their defense mechanism. It looks like blood. It's not actually blood because insects don't bleed. They have hemolymph, and so it's not blood, but it's red, and so it looks like their noses are bleeding whenever you sort of frighten them. Bloody-nosed beetle, stopped in his heathland trek, explains intimacy to a Welsh boy who thinks he found a pet. I will never be your dog, boy, nor my spit a trick you can master, nor come loping dumb across goose grass to lick sweat or tears from silt's soft flesh. Won't scratch a post with dew-beaded tarsi, bat a tuft of crochet mouse, swim to your finger, nibble an extended biscuit, make puppy eyes at you, across hedgerows with ultraviolet lenses you don't know to envy. Defenses spring eternal, claws, clicks, self-burial, see my carmine drop about to drip. You who run to middle school bathrooms, hands fluttering like killdeer away from the nest, your smirch begging Oxford, so ready to disappoint mother. I know you. Look how a miniature pointillist portrait spatters your cupped hand, the expression on your face of curious terror that would cast me far from you. You know that we want that intimacy, and then we get that intimacy, and it scares us because it looks like a bloody-nosed beetle. I'll read, because it's kind of fun to read these if you'll humor me with the language poems. This one is Dickinson's Bees. Happy. Whistle once and bumbles flee the dark belt of a note. Zest is kin to this. Rot, hen of the woods, mushrooms, fruit. A lark is not bee, but part of the park bees keep up. Joyful. One never grows allergic to shy, wooded avenue figures, inclined to vanish when presence becomes overbearing as mastiffs bounding leashless to scatter leaf piles. Who wouldn't want to be swept, honey-fueled, over singed earth, blown cool with impending winter breezes, your dearest knitting golden groceries around you? Sublime. A dianthus may disappoint after April's dame rocket stopovers, yet the queen knows a sensation drones miss. Between each hill of breath lie clearings they never notice in flight, where nothing vies for more attention than her increated self. Excited. Hives begin as cavity, a trunk coated with propolis, then a queen sniffed, after which eggs never stop bobbing forth, gumballs at a factory of chewing workers, wadding saliva sticky pieces, pollen beating against clover-fueled chests, throbbing engines whose tanks will never run out. Respect the bees, respect those queens. They have then termite queens too. They do good work, those queens. And one more from each book. Let's see, I could read one of Will's. That would be one of William Wright's poems. Let's see, what's my favorite one in here? Understory, I think. It's in, if you get curious about it, they printed a nature issue in the Kenyon Review. They're doing that periodically. I don't know what their sequence is for them, but they cycle through these nature issues, and his understory was in either the first or the second Kenyon Review nature collection. Also, while I'm thinking about it, please check out Zone 3. If you write nonfiction, I'm the editor, and so hopefully you'll send me something and just put in the cover letter, hey, I sat in that beautiful gallery space and listened to you read, and take a look at my essay. And if you write poetry, tell Andrea Spofford that you heard me read, and I talked about Zone 3 here, and maybe it'll get to her. A lot of times it doesn't always get to us, but sometimes if you put the note in the cover letter, there's the secret insider info. A lot of times it does end up getting to us. Understory. And now we will witness the unseen flames, cardinal shit, apple maggots, fishbone thistle, squama and fauna scales, keratinous flakes flecking ground, sporiferous trees, ambassadorial as they kneel, hyssop, sometimes odoriferous, dried blood on bark, dropwort, smartweed and sweetleaf, outhouses still standing in a crush of woods, redolent of peaches. Early century crates breaking under the weight of wild squash, crimson minnows courting a swale, painterly over chalk white silt and rocks stroked with moss so green it hurts to look. Woad and its microcache of bluest rivers, whitloof chicory, good in salads, distant farmhouse windows on winter nights shining like citrine, stricken with sun, the yucca's blades curdled over with cream flowers a few April days. Jars of milk, smells of leaf fire, poxy bogs emeralded with mosquito eggs, itchweed, abelia, and spittlebugs with their soapy secretions. The half-buried bones of horses, their skulls ghastly and beautiful, musket balls buried for good. Possum oak and possums themselves, drooling and conspiratorial in suburban sheds. Ivory nuts and ivy tods, the helix lattices of lichen, gypsum and hagberry, the toothless kin-gone elderberry, who grin at the edges of cracked doors, kind or wary, snake skins, fraxinella, burning bush, understory flames, diatomaceous earth, the waxy cartilaginous bulbs of rocky shoal spider lilies, cutworms that gnaw on vegetable seedlings so that they fall like small timbers, capillary mattings, wicker water from reservoirs, wild decay, never Gothic, and wildest revival, never lofty. So it does kind of sound, see how our voices sound more similar, I think, than, and then, I will read In That Place if I can find it. Yeah, okay. This is a longer poem of mine. It's got 5 sections, and it begins with an epigraph by Fannie Howe. So you got your Fannie Howe doses, 2 of those tonight. In that place. To paint one rose equals a life in that place. 1. Backhoe operator shaves a beard of snow with a bucket razor. The one of several state employees who leaves the cleanest neckline, trims hoary hairs in a cleft chin, misses nothing, no grizzled dimple, icy washboard. A tender develops tenderness for the land, his jackdaw body singing in the cab. When a plot comes up for sale, he purchases it, pulls an articulated arm through the dirt, breaking ground, looks inside her hills. 2. The Cambrian earth populated the ocean with a sophisticated visual system of some 15,000 lenses in a single eye. Trilobites saw depth of field through stone, calcite inner cells of their scopes visible in a CT scan, magnified a diamond, shaped photoreceptor surrounded by petals, a fossilized flower before the terrestrial world evolved flowers. For over 270 million years they proliferated, eye stalks to see above mud, shades for light-dappled trawlers. A long love, doing with the sea what sex does, antenna diddling the floor. 3. A radiologist scrutinizes internal borders on silver-impregnated films, is paid handsomely for differentiating pre-invasive lesions from ground glass nodules, lives on the same dirt road as the backhoe operator, throws up a hand when they pass door to handled door, eyes in the same meeting place on their faces. 4. Horsetail lines the neighborhood stream, living fossil, the only remaining member of the genus Equisetum. Silicates on bristles, scouring rush for tin cups, the understory of Paleozoic forests. Their moisture-sensitive springs disperse spores instead of seed when the sack splits like a hose full of silt, half buried in the garden, duct tape raveling around its toffee mouth. 5. Blighted chestnuts recover on suburban lawns, sheep's legs taper pencil point wicks in the cool tallow of alfalfa. Blood moon nails over an oil pan. And the last poem that I'm going to read is, because I was talking in the workshop today about how metaphors often begin the poems and our thinking about our definition of specific things in the world, of specific insects or of specific insects as a category, fish as a category, birds as a category, more than animals, landscapes. How you define them can a lot of times, that's where creativity can come from. And so this one was very much coming, it was near the end of the book, it was written near the end of the book, and it was because I kept thinking about this, the timeline of insects. And it was truthfully giving me a bit of hope, because if you do very much environmental reading, there's much to despair about. The sixth extinction won the Pulitzer, and it's hard to read through it and not feel some despair, because Elizabeth Colbert tells it like it is. And I needed to think of the insect world and of what will carry on and what perseveres, and just the long timeline of their recovery and adaptation, and all of that gave me a lot of comfort and hope. And so that's where this poem came from. It's called The Long Timer. No endurance run outpaces leafcutter ants, month-long 4-minute mile marathons, or outnumbers pupae laved and licked before another virgin queen emerges and workers die ignobly, second only to human deforesters burning Amazon basin tracts like cherry Victorian love seats for timber. Except those preppers carpet gardens in biohazard swabbing fungi, knit filamentous frost under which spit-oiled strike wheels clock distant winds. Thank you.